For many years, especially in the 90s of the previous century, the words New Middle East had a clear and sharp connotation for peace and prosperity. Shortly after the terrorist attacks of the 7th of October and the wide-scale war to follow, the term was reshaped to describe a new reality in the Middle East. Some would describe this reality by focusing on the first stages of the war, where terrorist groups initiated armed attacks on Israel, including in President terms Tel Aviv. However, others would shift the focus to the late stages of the war, where the defeat of the above-mentioned groups has become manifest and decisive. To mud the water further, the quote-unquote surprising events in Syria, particularly the collapse of the Assad regime, added another facet to the new Middle East. This way or the other, it is clear to all of us, I hope, that we are facing, for the best or the worst, a new Middle East with new reality, new complexity, new challenges, and new risks, but also with new chances, new hopes, and new visions. In this session, which I'm chairing, I'm honored to host five distinguished speakers: Mr. Ziad Abu Zayyad, Professor Elie Podeh, Attorney Gilead Sher, Dr. Rula Hardal, and Professor Tamar Herman. I will discuss with them their insights on the possible prospects for peace following the 7th of October attack with them. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Professor Mohammed Wattad. I'm a law professor, president of Ramat Gan Academic College, and a former dean of the law school at Sfat Academic College. I would like to open this session by inviting Mr. Ziad Abu Zayyad, our first speaker. Mr. Ziad Abu Zayyad is a member of the Palestinian National Council, a former Palestinian Authority minister, and a former member of the Palestinian Legislative Council, chair of the Law Committee. He was a member of the Israeli-Palestinian bilateral negotiation in post-Oslo Accords and the first representative of the Palestinian Parliament to the Council of Europe. Mr. Ziad Abu Zayyad will talk to us about the Hamas-Israel war and its impact on peace and security. Mr. Ziad, the stage is all yours. You have 15 minutes. I will try to keep the time sharply. Please.
Thank you, Dr. Wattad, and I would like to start by thanking Professor Al-Magor and the organizers for giving me this opportunity to address this distinguished audience. I will read from a paper because I'm trying to catch up with the time for this presentation. I will start by saying one important starting point is the misrepresentation and framing of the war as a Hamas-Israel war, and this is an attempt to distort the reality and the true nature of the war. Though the attack was initiated by Hamas, Israel made a conscious decision almost from the first days to make it a war against all Palestinians, not only against Hamas fighters, and turned it to an opportunity to reshape the conflict and its future prospects. On the eve of October 7th, there was a military indifference in Israel based upon the conviction that Netanyahu government had been able to buy Hamas silence in Gaza with the dollar suitcases from Qatar and succeeded in marginalizing and weakening the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. On the regional level, there was indifference regarding the Palestinian cause and tendency to marginalize it for the sake of normalization with Israel as an ally against the so-called Iranian threat. The attack was perceived as an achievement for Hamas, causing a temporary increase in Hamas popularity in the Palestinian street, which declined later because these achievements did not withstand the calculations of cost and benefit. Some of these achievements, and not all of them, are summarized in the following points. The attack has proved that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict did not begin on October 7, but many decades before, and the failure to resolve that conflict had led to the occurrence of the attack. The attack stopped the normalization process and brought the Palestinian cause back on top of the regional agenda. Third, it proved that it's not possible to continue ignoring the rights of the Palestinian people indefinitely, and that the conflict may calm down for some time, but like sleeping volcano, it will continue to erupt from time to time until a just solution to the conflict is achieved. The attack proved that the normalization between Israel and the region can be achieved only through the recognition of the national rights of the Palestinian people and enabling the Palestinians to exercise their right of self-determination and establish their own independent state, and that the most relevant formula for this solution is the full implementation of the Arab Peace Initiative from 2002. Israel's security and stability depends, the attack proved that Israel's security and stability depends on American support, and that it cannot or should not rely on this absolute American support forever, and that it must realize that its security and stability depends on its integration in the region by resolving its conflict with the Palestinian people through a permanent and comprehensive peace solution. The continuation of the war and the massacres had led to a popular debate among the Palestinian people about the profitability of the October attack and the comparison between the aforementioned gains and the losses caused by the war. I would say that there is now a large majority between the Palestinians who believe that the October War did not bring the Palestinians closer to liberation and independence, but the opposite. However, the major repercussions of the quicksand October 7 attack can be summarized as the following. Hamas has lost the dream of expanding the scope of the war and turning it into a regional war by activating the cordon that was built around Israel by linking Hamas, Hezbollah, Syria, and the militias associated with Iran to a number of countries in the region. But though Hamas is in a predicament today, it's naive to believe that achieving a military victory over Hamas will achieve a permanent security and stability for Israel. In spite of the recent regional development, most notably changes of regime in Syria, which on the long term opened wider horizons to the continuity of unpredicted ongoing regional disruption. Although the recent battlefield and regional developments has whetted Israel's appetite to further expansion and attempts to dominate the region, the eternal truth is that occupation generates resistance and that violence breeds counter-violence, and making peace is the only way to break this vicious circle of violence and counter-violence. However, and as a footnote before ending this presentation, I would like to emphasize the importance of respecting the following facts as fundamental elements to any future peace process. First, an immediate cessation of war and all belligerent activities by all sides, Israelis and Palestinians, in Gaza Strip and the West Bank must be implemented immediately to create a positive climate conducive to a peacemaking process. Second, any attempt to deal separately with Gaza Strip isolated from the West Bank is deemed to failure. The integrity of the Palestinian territory in Gaza, the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, must be respected and accepted. The BA should have the leading role in any future arrangements for reconstructing the disastrous destruction of Gaza by Israel, which should be held accountable for what it committed in Gaza. 4, the role of neighboring countries, together with the international factors, should respect the Palestinian integrity and sovereignty and be in the criteria of supporting the enforcing process of empowering the BA towards being the future Palestine state. 5, any results of democratic elections in Palestine must be respected by Israel and the international community without any attempt to design or decide beforehand the outcome of the elections. 6, any suggested restrictions or limitations on the participation of any fanatic Palestinian faction in the Palestinian elections should be applied also on equal footing with Israeli fanatics' participation in the Israeli elections too. You cannot ask not to allow Hamas to be part in the Palestinian elections and allow, for example, Otzma Yehudit to be dominant in the Israeli elections. Today, we stand at the most dangerous crossroads in the history of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. The October attack and its repercussions have strengthened the power and influence of the racist fascist right wing in Israel, which indicates that the popular compass in Israel is heading towards transforming Israel from a democratic socialist state into a messianic halakha state that believes in Jewish supremacy and adopts racism, and poses a threat not only to the Palestinians, but also to the secular Jews who believe in the principles of democracy and social justice and want to live in a civil state. It also represents a threat to the neighboring countries to Israel. The failure of the international system to bring Israel's genocidal war to a stop has eroded its legitimacy while emboldening Israel to pursue the mentioned path of death and destruction, as well as accelerating the erosion of democratic values in Israel and accelerating the mentioned shift to the region of racism and exclusion of the other. In the absence of internal checks and balances and witnessing the shifts within Israel, it is increasingly clear that the external pressure is necessary to achieve any prospect for peace in this land. At this crossroads, the mutual interests of Palestinians who are struggling against the occupation and aspire to independence and freedom, and the interests of the Jews who believe in peace and democracy and social justice meet. The real test for the Israelis lies in the result of the upcoming Israeli elections, which may be held next year, and which could establish the dominance and control of the fanatic messianic right over the future of Israel, or restore rationality and wisdom to the ruling establishment in Israel and inspire hope in the search for the possibility of achieving peace between Israelis and Palestinians. The lesson that Palestinians and Israelis must learn from the horrors of the horrific October attack and the horrors of the war that followed is a two-part equation. The first part is that the Palestinians must realize and acknowledge that violence, war, and bloody attacks that they have practiced for decades against the Israelis will not bring them freedom and independence, and that they must seek another peaceful means to achieve security, peace, and prosperity for themselves and for the others. The second part of the equation is that the Israelis must understand that their continued strategic denial of the Palestinian national rights and aspirations, the continued Israeli greed and avarice to seize more and more territories and using military forces and operations to resolve the conflict will not bring security, peace, and stability for them. When the two sides learn the two parts of this equation, only then there can be a horizon open to achieve peace, security, and justice for all Israelis and Palestinians, whether in two states living side by side in harmony, mutual recognition, and peaceful coexistence, or in one state based upon complete equality between its citizens, regardless of their religion, color, or race. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ziad. רפי, מי עוזר לי פה להעלות את הדובר הבא? בזום, הבנתי. כן, כן. אוקיי.
סליחה? הדובר הבא?
אלי פודה?
אלי פודה, כן.
אלי פודה בזום, לא?
כן, הוא.
יש פה איש שאמור לעשות את זה.
אני רואה אותו פה, אני מסתכל לכאן.
אני לא יודע לאיש הזה, זה איש...
תוציא אותו מהקופסה, כן?
Our next speaker is Professor Elie Podeh. Elie Podeh is a full professor in the history of the Muslim peoples in the Department of Islamic and Middle East Studies at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. He served as the department chair during the years 2004-2009 and president of the Middle East and Islamic Studies Association of Israel during the years 2016 till 2022. Among his recent books, publications, it is worth mentioning Chances for Peace, Missed Opportunities in the Arab-Israeli Conflict, published in 2016, and his 2022 book, Israel's Secret Relations with States and Minorities in the Middle East for the period 1948 until 2020. Professor Podeh will be talking to us about Israel in the Middle East following the 7th of October, plus changes, plus set la mime. I'm trying to study French, but my French is too bad, so I guess this is French if I recognize this correctly, right? So you say the title of your session. Thank you very much. The stage is yours. 15 minutes, please.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. Thank you all, and thank you, Professor Rafi Almagor, for inviting me to this important conference. I really regret the fact that I'm not there. I have so many colleagues and friends over there, and I'm here in Japan, which I enjoy very much, but at the same time, it would have been a pleasure to meet you all. Here it's almost midnight, so you can understand I was supposed to be in the last panel, which was after 1 o'clock, and then I asked Rafi to make it earlier, so therefore I was integrated within this panel. So I guess that the subject that I'll be talking about is related directly and indirectly to this panel, and I will talk about Israel's role in the Middle East after the war, the changes, and some of the things that remained constant. My presentation will be divided into 3 sections. First of all, I would like to talk about the political features of the war. And secondly, to talk about Israel's place in the region. And the third part, where do we go from here? And hopefully we have enough time in order to present the 3 parts. So let me share with you the presentation that I have. Okay. Can you see it? Is it okay?
כן, אלי.
Yes, I can hear you.
רואים, רואים.
It's not in the presentation.
Yes, we can see the presentation.
Yeah, okay, good.
The presentation.
Press F5.
All right. So let's begin with some political features of the war, which are very general. And the first one is that during the war, what we witnessed is the Middle East as a distinct region. Now, I'm emphasizing that because in the past, that was not the case usually, because we've seen almost all the region involved in the war in one way or another. And certainly all the major powers in the Middle East were involved. Israel and Egypt and Turkey and Iran, of course, Saudi Arabia. I mean, we are all familiar with the leading countries. Secondly, usually we spoke in the Middle East in particular about the Arab system because it has many common features. First of all is the common Arab national identity, but also the institution of the Arab League and so on. But the Arab League and the Arab system was not relevant in this war whatsoever. And certain countries played certain roles here and there, but I mean, as a system, the Arab system did not play a crucial role. Certainly, there is no Arab leader. I mean, in the past, if we had Egypt or sometimes Iraq, maybe even Syria or Saudi Arabia, we can't see in particular a specific leader that is leading the Arab state. It is true that sometimes certain countries, and I would imagine that Saudi Arabia in particular, is playing a significant role in the system, but nevertheless, these are not the important players in the system. Next, until recently we know, I mean, the major change in Syria, but until recently there were no significant changes within and between the regional coalitions. And Iran was still maybe trying to recruit additional countries to its axis, mainly Jordan and Sudan. In Sudan, there is some success. However, in Jordan, it failed completely so far. Next, the war essentially was not between states so much, but between Israel, excluding Iran, of course, but non-state actors. And that is a very unique feature of this war, and I would say in general, that this is a very important new feature globally. The fact that these and other non-state actors are playing such a crucial role in wars and in other events as well. And we saw that, I don't mention, I mean, all the names, all of them are well known. Next, no doubt now, more than a year after the start of the war, we can see or conclude that there is a major setback to the resistant camp and that Hezbollah has received a major blow. But we have to remember that the organization, in contrast to Hamas, is very much consolidated inside Lebanon. And its position in Lebanese politics is still very much strong, and therefore I would imagine that it will attempt now to further consolidate its position in Lebanese politics. And this is in complete contrast to what happened to Hamas in Gaza. And next, obviously, the toppling of the Assad regime, which in many ways is an unintended result of the war, which is connected, as I said, indirectly, but even during the war, I mean, In reality, Syria was part of the resistant camp, but I mean, actually, it played a very minor role. However, the toppling of the Assad regime is very crucial to the change of the balance of power. Now, I guess that many of you, some of you are familiar with Patrick Seals, the famous biographer of Assad, the father, and he was, one of his books is The Struggle over Syria. And his thesis was, which is to some extent is still true, very much valid, that who wants to control the Middle East system needs to control Syria. And this is very much true with regard to the international system or the regional system. And what we witness right now is a complete change because Syria is, of course, disengaging itself from the resistant camp. Whether it will go in the other direction is still an open question, but nevertheless, we are expecting a major change in the Syrian position in the system. And finally, growing alienation between rulers and ruled in the Arab countries in general, but mainly in the moderate camp. Um, and that is in light of the popular support for and of the Palestinian issue. I will mention later also the importance of that issue. And the reemergence of the Palestinian issue in regional and international politics following the decline before and after, in the aftermath of the Abraham Accord. I think that what is very much clear that that was one of the most important results of the war, if not the major one, and I will talk about it in a minute. Now, let's talk a little bit about Israel's place in the region and some features that emerge as a result of the war. First of all, with regard to the question of deterrence, it is quite clear the 7th of October surprised Israel and exposed its vulnerability and shook its deterrence. Now, when we examine the situation something like a year after, it seems that Israel regained maybe not all of its deterrence capability, but it improved dramatically, and therefore we are in a different situation. In terms of the regional coalitions, well, as I said before, until recently, no major changes. But during the war, what we witnessed is some minor changes or alterations. For example, Jordan recalled its ambassador, but behind the scenes, it cooperated with Israel, especially when Iran attacked Israel in April 2024. And therefore, in general, we can talk about continued cooperation with the peace and normalization countries. With Turkey, there was a substantial change in terms of diplomatic relations, and especially in terms of economic trade. Turkey, actually, before the war, was the biggest economic trade partner of Israel, with something like $7 billion annually, and that collapsed or stopped. I would say almost all of it stopped, although indirectly behind the scenes, I think that some of it still gets to Israel. Um, and of course, recently, Syria's defection from the resistant camp is, as I said before, a major change. Then, the persistence of a regional alliance. And that is, again, an interesting phenomena that happened. And I think that maybe some of us, including myself to some extent, we were surprised to see that this alliance, what we call the moderate camp, remained throughout the war. Not only that, but it functioned quite well during Iran's attack. And that is connected, of course, with the fact that Israel joined the CENTCOM, that was in January 2021, following the Abraham Accord, and which enabled the establishment of the Middle East Air Defense. And in such a way, there was collaboration between Israel and some of the Arab countries, of course, including the United States and other countries as well, but I'm emphasizing in particular the role of the Arab countries. But to remember that they were unwilling to acknowledge that. I mean, all that cooperation went behind the scenes, and in that respect, what happened was that relations between Israel and those countries went back to the old pattern of before the Abraham Accord, that relations were secret, were only behind the scenes. What are the possible explanations for that behavior, or the continuation or the persistence of that collaboration? I can mention here 3 of them. One, realist consideration, the shared interest vis-a-vis common enemies, whether it's Iran or Islamic jihadi elements. Secondly, the reluctance to jeopardize relations with the United States. And finally, growing recognition and acceptance of Israel as a fait accompli and possibly a regional power. But I want to emphasize that all these considerations are mainly relevant to rulers and elite, but not necessarily to the people. Where do we go from here? I want to mention a few elements. First of all, one thing about wars and as opportunities. Now, in my research on missed opportunities in the Arab-Israeli conflict, it came that very clearly that wars, revolutions, changes of regimes, they create opportunities to make changes that they don't necessarily happen, but at least they offer an opportunity. Now, a clear or an ideal opportunity exists when you have a combination of a turning point like war and the existence of a concrete plan. For example, the United States or the Arab states, the Arab Peace Initiative, whatever. I mean, if they collide, the existence of the turning point and the plan, then it offers an opportunity. Whether it will be seized by the parties, that's a different question, and sometimes opportunities are missed by one party or by both of them. So that is one issue that I want to emphasize, because I feel or I think that historically speaking, for sure we can see that what happened now can be considered as an opportunity to do something. Whether it will be seized, it will be done, that is an open question. What about Gaza? The Israeli assumption is that Hamas will not remain in Gaza. This is still an open question. And other possibilities, an upgraded political Palestinian Authority, Arab forces entering Gaza, the chances in my mind are very small, an international force supervised or not supervised by the UN, another possibility, local forces, unrealistic in my mind, but in any case, the government vacuum must be filled. In my opinion, the right solution should be an upgraded Palestinian Authority, which means that the return of the PA to Gaza as well within some agreement that will be comprehensive, and I will elaborate on that in a minute. Lebanon, an opportunity to reach a political settlement with Lebanon, big question mark, I'm not sure. The non-Shiite elements like the Christians and the Sunnis are not strong enough to promote a settlement, while Hezbollah, at least domestically, is still very strong. And therefore, I'm not sure that it is possible to go beyond what achieved so far. What about Syria? The situation is still unclear, of course, but Assad's fall may herald a new beginning to Israeli-Syrian relations. But in many ways, it's very early to predict. I want just incidentally to refer to an article of mine that was published just 2 weeks ago in Israel Studies, and it deals with Israeli-Syrian secret and public uh, encounters from 48 until 2023. And then where you go historically and try to analyze, the opportunities and the possibilities, then you'll be surprised to see how many opportunities existed in the past. Eventually, they were not seized. An agreement was not signed. But I mean, there was something there, and therefore maybe these examples might, stand as another example for us today to look in the future. But that's still too early to predict, and therefore I think that the main issue should be, and is the main focus, which, if I'm not mistaken, will be followed later by other speakers, and that is the issue of normalization with Saudi Arabia. And during the war, the Saudis expressed willingness to move forward, but in return, they emphasized the establishment of a Palestinian state within the 67 borders, and many ways it is a return to the position of Saudi Arabia in the Arab Peace Initiative. So this is more or less the Saudi position today. Now, the big question is to what extent the Saudis will stick to that position, whether they will be willing to settle for less than a Palestinian state. Before the war, that was the issue, that was the case. It seems that the Saudis are willing to move forward for just some kind of less settlement that is less than the establishment of a Palestinian state. Now the situation has changed dramatically, and it seems that the Saudis are now more committed to the issue of establishing a Palestinian state. Now they are also promoting the coalition, the international coalition with the European Union, with something like 80 or 19 countries involved in that coalition. So in such a way, they committed themselves to the issue of establishing a Palestinian state. Will they be able to return, to withdraw from that position? That is an open question, and I think that we should pose a big question mark on whether it will be possible for them to retract from that statement. What is the main Israeli dilemma now? In order to deal with Iran, which remain the main issue in regional politics from Israel's point of view, and not only from the Israeli point of view, Israel needs a regional alliance along with the United States, more or less the one that operated during the war in April. But in order to preserve that alliance, it has to make concessions on the Palestinian issue. So there is a dilemma, or there is a contradiction that this or another government will have somehow to deal with, and particularly for that, the existing government, that will be an hard issue, no doubt. But I think that, and that is my final point, I think that the war created an opportunity for Israel to integrate into the region. Maybe it didn't seem so at the beginning, but now at the end of the war, it seems that there's now a real opportunity. But this comes with or at a political price, and the question is whether Israel will will seize the opportunity. Look at the map here. This is a map from 21, and look at the blue color. These are the countries that established diplomatic relations with Israel. The red, of course, are the resistant camp. The yellow are less relevant because they usually were not involved. And the green one are those who continued cooperating behind the scenes. So let's assume that Israel goes in the direction of normalization, and indeed Saudi Arabia turns into another normalization country, then it means that you see a different Middle East. Not only that, Saudi Arabia's role in the region is very important. As I said before, if I have to select the most important Arab country at present, I would say this is Saudi Arabia. And also it's important in Islamic terms, the fact that it is a leading country among the Islamic, the 57 Islamic countries. That is an issue by itself. And obviously, Saudi normalization with Israel might affect other Islamic countries like Indonesia and Pakistan. So, I mean, the options are enormous, but there is an opportunity or there is a possibility, but it very much depends whether Israel will be willing to pay the price at the Palestinian issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Podeh. Our third speaker is Attorney Gilead Sher, a fellow in Middle East Peace and Security at the Barak Institute and co-founder of the central headquarters of the pro-democracy resistance movements. He was chief of staff and policy coordinator to the Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak and the senior negotiator at the Camp David Summit and Taba talks, and the delegate to the 1995 Israeli-Palestinian interim agreement negotiation under Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. Additionally, he served as a senior fellow at the INSS, the Institute for National Security Studies near Tel Aviv University. He was a visiting professor at several leading academic institutes worldwide. Attorney Gilead Sher will discuss with us a post-war framework for Middle East security, peace, and normalization. The stage is yours, please.
Good evening. First of all, it's not the Barak Institute, it's the Baker Institute for Public Policy at Rice University. Sorry. And I think that my presentation will echo somewhat the previous speakers' comments, Elie's and Ziad. Unlike them, I'll try to stick to the framework, the timeline that was proposed by the organizers. A small group of people from the Middle East, Europe, and North America started working on the day after, a few weeks after October 7. The group was comprised of officials and unofficial individuals whose identity is not yet to be disclosed, except for my Palestinian partner in this endeavor, Samih Al-Abid. As the aggravated situation in the Middle East evolved, it became clear to us that any de-escalation and subsiding of future conflicts would need to be dealt with through a regional and international outlook. We thought that if there's any hope to bring about a new vision for the future, hope for the future, it must be based on creating a robust coalition of countries. Despite the reality of bloodshed, bereavement, terror, and deeply rooted animosity on all sides, our effort is predicated on the belief that future generations need not to be held hostage to such suffering. This proposal, it was distributed just at the beginning of this session, is not another think tank exercise, but rather one that we have reason to believe will soon be formally adopted in one way or another. And I'd like to zoom in to highlight a few points in the framework for Middle East security, peace, and normalization. You have the document. I'll just talk about several points that I would like to emphasize. There are two major considerations. Firstly, to provide a time-bound transitional period for control and administration of Palestinian territories, including a plan for the reconstruction of Gaza, leading to mutual recognition of the State of Israel and the future State of Palestine, both on recognized borders and such recognition by key players, Arab states, European countries, and the United States. And secondly, the need to involve regional and international actors to incentivize the parties to confirm diplomatic and legal legitimacy, to ensure accountability, and to facilitate implementation. The framework is based on a number of principles, and here they are. Security for all parties concerned, and commitment to working together towards regional security and to combating terrorism, aggression, violence, and political extremism across the Middle East. Two states for two peoples, Israel and Palestine, living side by side in peace and security based on United Nations Security Council resolutions 242 and 338, and in line with the main principles of the 2002 Arab Peace Initiative. Notice of intent to declare mutual recognition between Israel and Palestine, as well as recognition of Israel and Palestine by all parties participating in the framework, subject, however, to meeting binding commitments in a benchmarked transitional phase, including acceptance by each party of the other party's right to liberty, equality, as well as achieving clear progress on de-radicalization on both sides, an end to incitement, prerequisite Palestinian reforms, and other milestones, all detailed in the document. Other components to be mentioned are a coalition led by the United States and the European Union in collaboration with regional parties to provide international and regional support, as well as involvement and participation in the governance, security, economic, and diplomatic agreements. The contracting parties to an agreement would be the State of Israel, the Palestinian Authority, or the PLO, which will become, through the process, the State of Palestine, and of course, Arab countries. Upon fulfillment of the agreed upon milestones, a Palestinian state will be recognized by contracting and participating countries to the framework within the defined period. A United Nations Security Council recommendation for admission of Palestine to the United Nations as a member state will be made only at this point in time. Upon fulfillment of the agreed upon milestones in the transitional period, comes normalization of relations between Israel and members of the Arab Leagues or other Arab countries. Recognitions of the borders of Israel and Palestine will take place by the end of phase one of the final status negotiations. As to the governance of the Palestinian state, the conveners and the contracting parties will work with the Palestinian state to develop and reform institutions. Gaza, which was referred to by the previous speakers here. The conveners and the contracting parties will develop a detailed plan for the reconstruction and development of Gaza with its own timelines. We'll create a special regional and international fund for the reconstruction and development of Gaza and Palestinian state building. Now, there is a transitional period, of course, between the situation now and, and the final pictures that we would like to see, the final outcome of this process. So during a transitional period of up to 5 years, Egypt, Jordan, and other international actors, in coordination with the United States, will form a security mission that will work with the Palestinians to restructure and train their security forces and ensure security cooperation with Israel. It is imperative that reforms related to mutual recognition, including security, take place in the 2-year transitional period. Negotiations on a two-state solution, two state for two people, final status, will begin immediately after the launch of the framework, whenever it is. The talks will take place in 3 phases, each lasting 1 year, and progress will be dependent on the achievement of the milestones. Transitional territorial measures for the West Bank and East Jerusalem will be applied during phase 1 of the final status negotiations, lasting 1 year only. No settlement grows during that period until their future is decided by the parties. As to the regional security arrangements, the United States will lead a regional and international alliance to ensure security for all regional parties involved in the framework to combat violence, extremism, hate speech by all parties in the Middle East. And, of course, ensure stability throughout security instruments. We spoke about regional economic cooperation and integration, and about the monitoring and the implementation phases. Something that all of us know was a failed process during the last 3 decades, the implementation. To ensure implementation of agreed commitments, various aspects of this framework will be linked. For example, international and regional financial support for the Palestinian state will be linked to and conditioned by implementation of state building and reforms, cessation of terrorism, violence and incitement, and security commitments. Steps to implement regional cooperation and normalization will be linked to Israel implementation of territorial commitments. Furthermore, commitments for the transitional periods will need to be strictly monitored. This will be achieved through 3 mechanisms detailed in the document: a steering committee, working groups, implementation working groups, and efficient and binding dispute resolution mechanism. Lastly, we have addressed the disruptive players outside the perimeter of the framework so that it will not be hostage to the demands of those who reject it. Let me end by saying that the cliché about things being the darkest before dawn sometimes actually applies. The current crisis, with hundreds of thousands of displaced on all sides, with many thousands dead, is as dark as things have been. Despite despair, there is hope. There's hope in a regional way forward for the Middle East. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And with this positive hope, we move to our next speaker, Dr. Rula Hardal. an associate professor in political science, and a Palestinian co-director of A Land for All, Two States, One Homeland, a joint Palestinian-Israeli political organization, and a research fellow at the Shalom Hartman Institute in Jerusalem. She was a visiting professor at several academic institutes worldwide, including in Japan and Portugal, and she's a member of two research groups on nationalism and citizenship in Israel at the Van Leer Institute in Jerusalem, a member of the board of directors of Adala, the Legal Center for Arab Minority Rights in Israel, and a member of the board of directors of Amnesty International in Israel. Dr. Rula Hardal will discuss with us revisioning Israel and Palestine after October 7, 2023, the need for new grammar towards a political settlement. Please, the stage is yours.
Okay, good evening. Respect to all of you that you stayed until now. Well, I have to admit before I start my presentation that I have a lot to say about all presentations. Maybe one thing, two things. I'm going to complete, and I hope I'm going to expand the whole discussion that we are hearing since early in the morning to maybe further aspects. And the second point is that I still hear the same language that we had before many years, and I'm going to refer to that. And maybe this is one of the problems, as we don't have war outside, and as we know that the war is ended, and as we live in a vacuum. October 7th and the aftermath Israeli war on Gaza. And it's important to mention, and I agree with Ziad, that the Palestinians, all Palestinians experience this war as not a war against Hamas or even against Gaza, but against all the Palestinian people. October 7th and the war have had a decisive impact on both national identities, narratives, collective reactions, feelings, self-perceptions, and consciousness of both people. On the Jewish side, October 7th became a second central component of shaping the collective Jewish history and memory after the Holocaust. The attacks of Hamas on October 7th deeply shocked the collective feelings of security, raised serious existential fears of threat and new traumas. The immediate collective reaction of the Israeli Jewish society was actually revenge, collective blindness, that still continues until now, dehumanization of the Palestinians. For Palestinians, the past year represents a second Nakba, not less. The difference is that this is a daily, live, screened and streamed Nakba that includes transfer, collective killing and bombing, ethnic cleansing and mass starvation in Gaza, deepening the Israeli military control and the apartheid in the West Bank. The Palestinian citizens of Israel were considered also automatically by the state and by the majority of the Israeli society as part of the other, part of the enemy, and not as citizens. And they were automatically explained by the majority of the Israelis as well as the Israeli authorities who is the boss here, Yahribon. In short, Palestinians all over the land of Israel, Palestine, and outside it are experiencing this phase of violence as a war that aims to eliminate the collective national existence of them in their homeland. The Zionist and the Palestinian mainstream national narratives are very different and opposing narratives. Although they do share a remarkably similar syntax and grammar, one trait common to both dominant historical narratives is that each relies alongside adoption of the fundamental catastrophe, relies on simultaneous and forceful negation, explicit and implicit, of the catastrophe of the other. Each side is convinced that it is history's, that it actually, or each of them, is the history's ultimate victim, while denying or downplaying the suffering of the other side in order to validate its own claim. However, and following 100 years of struggle between the Zionist movement and the Palestinian national movement, the very simple fact is that we have a binational reality in Israel-Palestine between the Jordan and the sea. And here I will move to my core subject, the need for a new grammar. What does it mean to construct a new grammar for Israel-Palestine? At its core, this entails rethinking the fundamental assumptions that have governed the conflicts, narratives, and solutions. My argument is advocating for a new national and political grammar that might enable both peoples, the Israeli Jews and the Palestinian Arabs, to break the binary reality of defeating and eliminating each other. There are two main new grammar, as I said, and here a note. When I say new grammar, I refer to the language and the assumptions. In terms of the language, before I continue speaking about the new components, the national and the political and new grammar, and I started my presentation with saying something about the language. We need a new terminology in terms of the analysis and of framing the situation between the Israelis and the Palestinians. Besides, Israel and Palestine, the Israelis and the Palestinians are not static societies, and they are not exist in a vacuum, but in a non-static regional and global geopolitical system. The second point, when we speak about language, I'm still with the term of language, is valid also to the previous common imagination of any solution of the conflict. And here I mean mainly that I refer to the most famous attempt to solve the conflict between before 30 years, which is the two-state solution. We cannot refer, as a lot of us did since early in the morning, to refer to the two-state solution using the same terminology and imagination and considerations and assumptions while we are speaking about a solution that was offered before 30 years, not speaking about the major problems that we had in the whole concept of Oslo. I will explain a little bit about the national and about the two components of the new grammar, the national and the political one. In terms of the national grammar, I won't expand a lot because I spoke in different previous occasions about the need for transformative national narratives of the Palestinians and the Israelis. In short, when we speak about transformative national narrative of Zionism, I call, and here is my offer intellectually for the whole discussion about decolonization and liberation among Palestinian scholars, but not only among Palestinian scholars, that we need to start speaking about when we speak about transformation of the Jewish Zionist national narrative, to speak about decolonizing Zionism from its settler colonial practices and violence. On the other side, I don't give the Palestinian national movement any compromises. They need also to have a serious transformation in their national narrative toward acknowledging the right of the Jewish people to define themselves as people, as a national group, with the right of self-determination, to acknowledge the traumas and the collective memories of the Jewish people, not only throughout the years of the conflict here, but mainly because of the Holocaust. And to accept the claim of the Jewish people of belonging to this place as also their homeland. Having said all of this, I will move to the second part of the new grammar, which is the political one. The current grammar relies heavily on binaries: colonizer, colonized, occupier, occupied, victim, and so on. Regardless to mention that there is old grammar when we speak about Israel and Palestine during the last at least 25 years, or about the conflict, which is mainly around managing the conflict and shrinking the conflict, turning into normalization and peace with the regional states without solving the Palestinian question, hoping that this will bring stability and security for Israel and for the Israelis. While these binaries reflect real asymmetries and injustices, they also constrain the imagination of what is possible. A new grammar should acknowledge first the binational reality that we have. This means that we have two national groups living between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. We need to acknowledge also the binational construction under one political regime, which is the State of Israel, with exclusive Jewish domination and supremacy. The new political grammar that I suggest is an integrative approach, and here I will come to the last part of the theoretical aspect and move at the same time to the practicalities. Is an integrative approach derived from three theoretical approaches that can be translated into political arrangements and able to take the future of both peoples beyond binarism, elimination, supremacy, and so on. And here I'm speaking about borrowing and taking notions from the liberal Westphalian approach. The second one is binationalism, and the last one is shared sovereignty. And I will say a few words about all of these three main pillars of the integrative model that I suggest. The liberal Westphalian approach, self-determination in the meaning of having the right of self-determination for people, for nations, in a nation state. In the integrative model that I suggest, there is no space today, following long decades of conflict, and especially after October 7th, to underestimate the centrality of national aspirations of both national narratives around the right of self-determination in two independent, sovereign nation states, not less. And here I have something to say. It's not really about the two states. We have already two states. Israel is a sovereign state. It has its own problems in terms of the internal political system and its democracy and so on, as well as Palestine. It's about to acknowledge the historical right of the Palestinian people for self-determination, which suffers actually from negation, ongoing negation from the Israeli side. And I don't need to remind all of you about the whole discourse in the Knesset and outside the Knesset during the last couple of months about the Palestinian state. So I mean, we need to stay, because both people still emphasize their needs for self-determination in two nation states. We need to keep this aspect in the model that I imagine there, and speak about the two states that we have. But we have one state that controls the other one. The second pillar, as I said, is binationalism. And here, binationalism as a political theory for a shared and egalitarian future of the two people, I don't in any way refer to the understanding or to the most automatic understanding when we speak about binationalism to a one state. I said two states. But yes, binationalism is an approach that challenged the old grammar of solving the conflict based on separation and segregation, which is not only immoral, but also unrealistic under the intertwined reality of the Palestinians and the Israelis. And binationalism is not my idea, and it's not only a Palestinian idea, not really. I'm afraid that we don't have a lot of time to refer to Jabotinsky and Ben-Gurion and to Martin Buber and Judah Magnus, but all of them actually spoke when they wrote, when they imagined, when they wrote about Zionism, when they imagined the future of the Jewish people, they spoke about binationalism and about multinationalism. So I will skip all of the few examples actually that I have from Martin Buber until Ben-Gurion, and go to the third and last component of the integrative model that I imagine, which is a shared sovereignty. Alongside the two independent states and the transformative national narratives, the mutual recognition of the binational reality, there is a need. There is a need for shared sovereignty, rethinking, control, supremacy, and power. Shared sovereignty is a concept that challenges the national Westphalian model of absolute state sovereignty, where a single entity exercises exclusive control over a defined territory. Instead, it envisions overlapping forms of authority, enabling multiple groups to govern the same space cooperatively. In the integrative model that I'm offering here, adding the approach of shared sovereignty is an essential layer to the classic approach of the Westphalian understanding of the sovereign independent national states, in this case, the Israeli and the Palestinian state. This model is particularly relevant in our case. It acknowledges the interconnectedness of Israeli and Palestinian lives, economies, geographies, and seeks to build a political system that reflects this reality. Transformative national narrative, mutual recognition, equality, both individual and collective equality, reconciliation, and restorative justice are crucial conditions to move toward this new model, and political grammar then that can be implemented into a new political reality of two sovereign states in a confederative arrangement of shared institutions for governance, security, and economic cooperation. I will end by referring to a question that was raised a lot today, and during the last hour maybe also, when you, Rafael, asked Jan about what he thinks about the two-state solution. I'm busy with this question because I speak all the time about solutions and about the situation in Israel-Palestine, and my answer is yes and no. Yes, because we need to be able to retrain our political imagination muscles, and because we don't have any other alternative if we don't advocate for changing the situation. We know what is the alternative actually. Our government in Israel is started to implement its very clear vision. And no, because we cannot go back 30 years ago and speak about the two-state solution in the same frame of assumptions and terminology, and that's why I tried to offer a new paradigm that includes the two-state solution, but not only. Thank you very much.
Now we will be moving from the grammar to interpretations. Our last speaker is Professor Tamar Herman, an Israeli political scientist specializing in tracking and analyzing public opinion, particularly regarding national security issues. She's also an expert in grassroots politics, NGOs, and political science activism and party participations. In addition, she is the academic director of the Family Center for Public Opinion and Policy Research at the Israeli Democracy Institute in Jerusalem. Professor Tamar Herman will talk to us about the emergence of the new app normal and its interpretations, Israeli Society 2023-2024. The floor is yours, please.
We will see the presentation this morning. The Israel Democracy Institute and my team, we presented the President of the state, President Herzog, with our annual report on Israeli democracy 2024. And actually what we see is a very complex situation, which I try to connect with what we have heard before and probably with what we will hear later on. I see that Elie is here, peeping on us from Japan. And I'll start by it doesn't move. Okay. I'll skip most of my framework, but as we know, we are now after a very deep crisis, intensified crisis in 2023 and then 2024. We had the political turbulence due to the contested judicial reform or judicial overhaul, depending on who you are talking with. On October 7th, we experienced what we experienced and the war afterward. We had economic and international struggles, escalating military expenditures, massive reserve force mobilization, dislocation of large communities, strained the economy. Israel international status took a severe hit. Social fragmentation, the national consensus, which was already fragile, was further fractured. Relocation trend, increased number of Israelis opted for temporary or permanent relocation abroad, 55,000 actually. Left Israel between 2023 and 2024. It might be of interest to you to know that 38 of them are former newcomers from Russia, the Ukraine, the Soviet Union. So they are not Israeli born. Almost 40% of those who left Israel, for them it's a second relocation, and we know that immigrants live the new motherland or preferred country much more easy than native-born Israelis or in other places, other nationalities. So when we talk about this relocation, we should take into consideration who are the ones that are leaving the country. Obviously, they are, the others, the Israelis that left Israel are the more well-to-do, the more educated ones with the higher levels of human abilities to adjust themselves to new places. So we are losing specific groups, not necessarily representative of the entire Israeli population. Politically, I should add that the number of those leaving the country permanently or temporarily, of those defining themselves politically on the left, are much higher. So actually we see a correlation between people's propensity to leave Israel and their political affiliation, which of course undermines the ability of this political camp to go on struggling for its aims, be them domestic or external. We see, however, some signs of quote-unquote normalization, or as I put it in the title of my presentation, abnormalization, because some people are very critical of these developments and they see them as abnormal, not as normal. We see real estate demand which remained robust, stock market and Israeli shekel showing stability. Let me remind you that immediately after the declaration regarding the government's intention to implement this judicial reform, everyone said that the Israeli economy was going to be shattered. Okay, everyone will take out their money, there will not be any external investments in Israel. By the way, the defense tech is very prosperous in recent months in Israel. So the economy is quite stable until now. Active civil society organizations are driving national revival efforts. I should say that amongst these organizations, we hardly see any peace organizations. For years, I've been studying the Israeli peace movement, and we don't see them anymore. I mean, their share in the civil society has been reduced to almost none. And the national revival efforts involve, I'll say it in a minute, also a very strong aspect of security guarantees. Reconstruction efforts are robust in the Negev and already in the north, but they are dependent on securing these resettled settlements or resettled villages, kibbutzim and whatever. They demand high level of security, military security. They are not talking about changing the relationship with the people on the other side of the border. So the issue of trying to have a new grammar, as was mentioned here, I mean, we don't see it. We just see that the demand is to guarantee their physical security by military means. And this, of course, will be a big obstacle in the way of changing the relations along the borders. And majority of Israeli Jews reported in our surveys that they return to their routines in work, family, and social life. And if you don't believe me, this is the result of one of our latest polls. We asked this question in December 23, January 24, February 24, June 24, and September 24. And as you can see, amongst the Jews, over 2/3 are saying, yes, we are back to our old routine. And this is one of the very few questions in which we didn't find much difference between the three main political blocs, the left, the center, and the right. On the left, we got 67% who said, yes, we are back to our old routines. Center, 57%, and right, 71%, which means that the majority of the Israelis, Jewish Israelis, because as you can see, it's different amongst the Arab Israelis, are saying we are fine. And if you try to find a seat in a Tel Aviv restaurant on Friday evening, you have to make the booking 2 weeks in advance in order to get something later than 5 o'clock on Friday night. So people are, in a way, they are back to their own routines, but with some post-traumatic sentiments or senses that will prevent them from making any significant compromises on the security level. And this, of course, will be problematic from the point of view of peacemaking. Okay, some people are very critical of this normalization signs. They say that the social, it signifies or it points to social and political apathy. Some are talking about mental and personal negative impacts. There are some psychologists here that can explain to you what does it mean in more depth than I can. Undermining social values, amongst them peacemaking. I mean, this kind of new normalization or abnormalization actually exclude peacemaking from the value set of the Israeli Jewish majority group. And in fact, even if you talk to people on the left, they tell you, okay, we still stick to the two-state solution, but this is for the very long term, maybe a decade, maybe 2 decades, maybe 50 years. Hardly anyone is advocating implementing any quote-unquote radical move like that, even on the left. And some people are saying that it is risky for the nation's future because actually we are functioning with the crisis. Instead of resolving the crisis, instead of really facing the problems that were here before but certainly became bigger after October 7th, we are just getting used to it and living with it as if this is reality from here to eternity. Those who are talking about the positive sides, they say what we see here is what we call resilience, actually, psychological adaptation to a new situation. Everywhere you read that Israelis demonstrate psychological flexibility. They are focusing on the daily lives. I don't want to make a survey here, but how many of you skip the news compared to what you used to do in the past? Many people do not read the newspapers. We don't read the newspapers on paper, although I saw that Alfred is still holding a paper newspaper. But most of us read online, but people just skip it. They try to focus on the individual life, on the families. We see strengthening of the family ties following what happened on October 7th. People are going abroad for vacations. They are buying. I mean, commerce is up. Did you see what happened after the ceasefire in the north? The malls were actually fuller than full with people who just went out for the coffee shops, for doing some clothing purchases, and so on and so forth. Community solidarity, we see strengthened solidarity, and of course, this does not include the Israeli Arabs. I mean, the Jewish majority actually turned its back on the Israeli Arabs, although certainly the attitudes and the behavior of the Israeli Arabs at the beginning of the war and later on was more than perfect in terms of the fears that they would open another front within Israel. It didn't happen. Still, the suspicion towards them is more salient than it used to be before October 7th. Some people talk about the innovation and creativity of the startup nation, the way that the Israeli various industries dealt with what happened after October 7th and during the war, cultural strength, which in a way relates to what was mentioned here before. The Holocaust is much more present in the Israeli collective psyche after October 7th. I mean, it was very salient before that, but now, I mean, I do remember people in Tel Aviv, of all places, debating where were they going to put their kids if something like what happened in the Negev will happen in Tel Aviv. I mean, the probability of such a disaster to happen was minimal, but mothers talked about their nightmares and their seeking for a solution. If this will happen, where will they put their kids? Okay, and this, of course, is strongly correlated with the Holocaust memories and of course, the fears. And fear is a very bad guide. And learning processes, the people who see it positively are saying, actually, we are learning to live with a new reality. I'm not going to read all this poem, but this poem was written by a guy called Noam Chorev. Everyone is quoting Noam Chorev. I mean, very bad poetry, if you ask me. But he apologized for not relating more strongly to the suffering of the Israelis on one side only. I mean, he's not talking about what's happening on the other side. He doesn't apologize for anything that was done during this war. He says that I'm not going enough to all the demonstrations. I don't have enough eyes to cry for everyone, but these everyone are very, very specific. Okay? And this is the I apologize for him. What's happening in terms of assessing the national situation, Israel overall situation? As you can see, the purple line went up. These are the percentages of those who are saying the situation is bad or very bad. It got to a peak in May 2024. The military situation was bad. We didn't know what was going on to happen on the north and so on. But in October 24, we see an improvement. This is the kind of normalization that we see. However, the differences between the different political orientations or camps, if you wish, right is almost evenly divided between those who say good or very good, so and so the situation, or bad or very bad. But if you look at the center, it's already 58% who say that the situation is bad, and on the left, 76%. This goes hand in hand with the higher number of the people of the left to leave the country because the situation is so bad. Agree that the democratic rule in Israel is in grave danger. As you can see, the Arabs are always higher in the percentage of those who are saying that the situation is very bad. The Jews are below, but again, see the differences between the three political camps. This means that we do not have a public opinion. We have public opinions. 94% of the left are saying, yes, the situation, there is a grave danger. At the center, it's 71%. On the right, it's 38%. but they don't see the same danger, because the center and the right, the center and the left are saying, look what this government is doing to the democratic system. The right are saying, look what the judicial system is doing to Israeli democracy. So they do not agree about the danger that they actually are rallying upon. When we take them together, it's 54%. And I always say to my audiences, it doesn't mean anything, this 54%, because it's a combination of two totally different interpretations of the danger. Sense of personal security, again by political orientation. As you can see, 60% of the left say that their personal security is very low or quite low, okay? And it goes hand in hand with what I presented you earlier. Because they feel that the situation from their personal sense of security is very bad, they are packing much more easily. I mean, be it really packing or mentally packing. And they are not going to take any risk. Actually, and at the center it's 46%, and on the right it's only 33%, okay? So sense of security on the right is much better than in the center and on the left. And this, of course, I mean, has its own implication, because the right feel that they are quite okay in terms of personal security, and therefore they can take more risks, and they will not make any compromises on the level of peacemaking, if this is what they see as a risk. What is the situation about solidarity? As you can see, immediately after October 23, we saw an increase in the level of solidarity, and then a decline. Still, we are higher than where we were on June 23, which was one of the worst points in the conflict between the pro-government and the anti-government civil movements, if I could say. Agree that Israelis can always rely on their fellow Israelis to help them. We see a sharp increase on both the Jewish side and the Arab side. But then we ask, how about the ability to rely on the state to come to the end? And here we see a sharp decline on the Jewish side, and then an incline on the Arab side. And we thought it is a very strange answer, and we made a kind of a focus group, and we asked them, why do you give us this kind of an answer as an improvement of the state's aid to the citizens? And then we realized that when we say to come to their aid, they thought about the Jewish public. So they thought that the state is helping the Jews, and therefore they say, yes, it is helping the Jews, but it is not helping us. Okay, so sometimes when you get a very unlikely result in a survey, we should start talking to these people in order to understand where we are. Okay, prefer to remain in Israel. As I said, the left, 38% only on May 24 said, yes, we would like to stay in Israel if we will have a very good chance to get citizenship elsewhere. At the center, 56%, on the right, 74%. Is there a beacon of hope? This is the beacon of hope. We asked our interviewees what best ensures Israel's future security in the short and the long term. So in May 24, we saw that this is the total sample, Jews and Arabs. We saw that the majority, the plurality, 40% said strengthening Israel's military power. and only 19% said agreements with the states in the region, and both equally 34%. In October, already we had a plurality saying a combination of strengthening Israel power, but also getting to some agreements with the state in the region. In the long term, on both measurements, we saw that the plurality said a combination. So actually, there is some public acknowledgement that we should work in order to get to some kind of political agreement. But understandably enough, based on what I told you before, we can understand why they also see the military power as a guarantee for Israel's security in the future. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you all for your contributions. Please join me in thanking them. So thank you. This has been very constructive. And without further ado, I invite you all for a 15 minutes break, right, Rafi? We do have time for questions? Oh, that's perfect. Now, the questions before coffee. So anyone who has questions, please? Please, sir.
So, very short questions. Tamar, 55,000 left in 23-24. How does that compare, let's say, with 1 year before? And also, how many returned in that same period, and who returned? And also Aliyah. And also to Gilead, you know, you used the passive voice. Where are you? When you said that this is going to be adopted by whom? I'd really like to know what.
He apologizes, he's not here.
He apologizes.
Yeah.
He left? Okay. So we can leave that question open.
So it's very difficult to answer your question, Joel, because the Central Bureau of Statistics changed their parameters. But if we will try to make this statistical adaptation, we'll see that this number is about 30% higher than the year before or the year before that. Okay, so we do see an increase, but not as bad as Haaretz reports, with its advocacy of buying real estate in Portugal, Italy, Greece, and other parts of the world. We saw many young people who returned immediately when the war started, and they stayed here because some of them still do miluim in the reserve and so on and so forth. Aliyah came mainly from England and some from the United States. Mainly immediately when we saw these pro-Palestinian campaigns in the universities and whatever. We still don't know if these people will stay here. It depends on the overall situation, of course. But we do see indications that by surveys who are done abroad, not by us, that the sense of security of Jewish communities in the West was severely damaged. So will this be translated into making Aliyah? We're not sure, but they buy apartments. This is some of the increase in the real estate business in Israel, and they may come depending on what will happen here and what will happen
Thank
there.
you, Tamar. One last question, please, and I invite you all then afterwards for the coffee break. You can ask questions and have talks. So, sir, just to make kind of equality between the right and the left.
At this point of the day, it is for me the ideal point to ask a question to many of the people who have converged on the idea of a two-state solution. Because if I understand well, there is also a kind of consensus that two-state solution means a Jewish state and a Palestinian state. Okay, I hope I am translating what was percolating here. Now, this being said, my question to some of the speakers here is, a Jewish state would be sovereign, but for Rula that would like to incorporate a shared sovereignty, and a full sovereign Palestinian state. Now, my question is then the following. The Jewish state would be still be accepted with the law of return. That is, this is a Jewish state that potentially must receive, is open to receive all the Jewish people, and the Palestinian state would be then a sovereign state that could accept all the Palestinians according to its sovereignty, or am I completely wrong and the concept of two sovereign states is something else? Okay, does
You made your
someone
point.
want to answer to this key question?
I can answer it. You are absolutely right. If we speak about keeping the right of return to Israel the way that we have it now, although we know that not all the 7 million Jews are going to return back and to fulfill their right, then if you read our political vision, you will see that we developed a very creative mechanism or very creative mechanisms to deal with the deadlocks of Oslo, the classic two-state solution, such as Jerusalem, the settlements, and the right of return of the Palestinian refugees. So if we will keep in the future Israel as a Jewish state the right of return of all Jews as an automatic, natural right, then we need to handle the right of return of the Palestinian refugees the same way to Palestine, okay? But I think it's not realistic. There is a need to have arrangements between the two states around these two issues. And the settlements. This is another issue that we need also to tackle. And we have in our political vision, if you enter our website, you will read actually the solution that we offer for that.
I feel we are ready now.